People opposing women abuse is urging government to fast-track 3 bills that were introduced to Parliament in September 2020. The organization is asking South Africans to add their voice to hashtag End Domestic Silence by recording voice notes to the president during the 16 days of activism for no violence against women and children, urging the government to prioritize the bills. For more on this, I'm joined now by POWA CEO Makgaba. Mary, good evening and thank you very much for your time tonight on the Newsfeed Late Night. The 3 new bills then before Parliament, very important. Take us briefly through the bills and what each one contains and how significant game changers they are in this fight against gender-based violence.
Thank you, Tabo, for having me. First and foremost, let me talk about the criminal law, in brackets, which is the Sexual Offences and Related Matters Amendment Bill. This is a very important bill which relates to the sexual offences, like particularly your sexual violence, for your rape cases, for your incest, and so forth and so forth. So there have been certain new offences that have been added in terms of provision, particularly sexual intimidation, incest, to the extent of dealing with incest, as well as the National Register for Sex Offenders, which we normally abbreviate it as the NRSO. So there will be public naming and shaming of perpetrators. So we would love the bill to be passed as soon as possible because it is very important, because we are fully aware that the perpetrators of GBV are men. So we want to see men, particularly those who are perpetrators, being named and shamed in the NRSO, which is the National Register for Sex Offenders. We want this to jeopardize the chances for getting employment further, and also maybe in terms of CIPC, when they want to register for companies, be directors of companies, they need to be blacklisted. This is the most important bill for rape cases that are very alarming in our country. The second one, which is very, very important of the 3 bills, we're talking of the Domestic Violence Amendment Bill, which has extended certain provisions. For instance, in the Domestic Violence Act 116 of 1998, there was no provision for senior citizens, particularly elderly persons, in terms of elderly abuse. Currently, it's focusing on the bill on the provisions of those who are engaged can also lay criminal charges against the perpetrators, those who are in sexual relationships, those who are dating, those who are in customary relationships. So it is very important that they be fast-tracked, so that, because in the past it was only in terms of Domestic Violence Act, only when you have a relationship with somebody that you stay with or you share the same residence with. The third one is the Criminal and Related Matters Amendment Bill, which is very, very, very significant, which is also aligning to the Criminal Procedure Act, where it tightens the granting of bail in cases of GBV and femicide cases. It also expands offences for which minimum sentences must be imposed. Remember, in the past, before these bills were here, more of the rights were on the accused persons rather than the victims. We want them to be passed on as soon as possible so that we can protect women and children in as far as GBVF is concerned in this country.
So I want to go back to the bill of the amendment of the criminal law, particularly focusing on this question of sexual intimidation. Give us an example of what sexual intimidation would be, and therefore what would it mean for the one who's been sexually intimidated should this bill be passed?
Sexual intimidation can take various forms. It's very broad. But in terms of its definition as articulated in the bill, it could also include issues pertaining to harassment, where somebody can touch you, touch your bodily parts. Remember, at workplace, we've got high prevalent cases of sexual harassment, which are very much prevalent. Sexual intimidation could be somebody trying to make moves from you, touching your breast and doing anything as a woman. As long as you feel you're comfortable and it intimidates you, you will have to open the case for sexual intimidation.
Now, in terms of process, these takes about 153 days to be passed. And what is the process that follows thereafter, and how can it be sped up and prioritized?
We need government. We are calling for action. That's why we wanted our voice to be added in our partnership with Joko, because we wanted the matter to be fast-tracked as soon as possible, given that when we look into the alarming stats that we have in the country and the GBV hotspots, it is very, very imperative that they don't have to look at other issues. Remember, the Honorable President has alluded that this is the second pandemic, just like COVID-19. We wanted it to get the special treatment, just like COVID-19, so that we can protect all women, advocate for the rights of women, so that women can feel safe. Before a perpetrator is granted a bail, a complainant can also have a say in terms of whether the bail should be granted or not. So we don't want it to take long. We want it to be fast-tracked as soon as possible as a sense of agency. There is no time to waste, and then that's why we are doing this voice note, that we want all South Africans, including women and everybody, to support us so that we can collect and collate the voice notes into a petition and send it to the Honorable President of the country so that they are passed into law and are implemented with effective.
What are the other legs and components or elements of this hashtag End Domestic Silence? You want the voice notes, but what other programs are you going to be engaged in?
One of the programs that we are going to be engaged in, like on Friday, we'll be marching to the National Prosecuting Authority. It's one of our campaigns for POWA, where we'll be handing over the memorandum to Advocate Shamila Badoy, who's the National Director of Public Prosecution. On a similar note, we'll also be handing over the memorandum to the SAPS Minister, Becky Kele, because we've got frustration and challenges, particularly for protection of victims and our survivors that we are dealing with. We've got our demands, so we'll be handing over the memorandum as part of our campaign. With Joko, last year in August, we launched this hashtag. It was August 2019, which says End Domestic Silence. Remember, Joko is our main sponsor.
All right, that's the CEO of POWA there, Makgaba. Seem to have lost her there on the line with that conversation. Hashtag End Domestic Silence. They're calling on you to send voice notes to POWA, which they will collate and then forward this to President Cyril Ramaphosa so he can fast track and prioritize the issue of those bills that are before Parliament right now.